Well, hi everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Feeling Smarter. As always, I'm joined by my co-host, Tim Miller. G'day, Tim. How are you?
Yeah, going pretty well, Aaron. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. Well, we are closing in on the end of the financial year, and previously we've spoken about the opportunities that exist as we get closer to 30 June. But at the other end of the spectrum, we also see decisions made where people may look to wind up their self-managed super fund. So maybe to start off, why would people ultimately be looking to be making that decision, and what do they need to be thinking about throughout that process?
Yeah, look, it's an interesting one, and if I immediately sidestep just to before I go into that conversation, what's always interesting when you see the ATO annual and quarterly statistics that come out is that we all kind of get a bit ahead of ourselves. We go, oh, gee, there's not many windups in the September quarter or the December or the March quarter, and we go, oh, the numbers are looking pretty good, and then the June quarter numbers come around, and you see this big hit, and of course a lot of that's because it makes common sense. It's a common sense sort of scenario to wind up a fund as at the 30th of June because you've got to lodge a final tax return. But I guess it's because of this time of year people are thinking about, is the self-managed super fund right for myself? So we're going through a number of other sort of strategic decisions about contributions, about future pensions, and analysing, doing a cost analysis, and also that whole desire around whether or not people want to maintain a self-managed
Yeah.
fund. And so then the obvious decision is, well, either we keep going as it is, or we look to wind it up. And of course, the key to that is if you're starting to make that decision at the end of May, then you're probably not looking at a 30 June current year wind up. You're probably looking from a process point of view at the following financial year.
Yeah, so that's probably a really important point to present here, because here we are in sort of the back end of May. So how much time is enough time, I guess, is always the million-dollar question, and a lot of that is going to come down to the way in which this fund is ultimately structured.
Yeah. Yeah, and look, and I think too is, we've both been in the industry long enough. We bang on about that a fair bit, but is that there's that historical style of SMSF, that the fear factor SMSF, that's always sort of rolled in the old cash environment, and that fund can pretty much be wound up, in a heartbeat. If they've got individual trustees and nothing else to focus on, they can roll their money out or pay their benefit out if they've met a condition of release. But the reality of a fund that invests through a well-considered investment strategy, whether they're listed securities, managed funds, property, and of course, the further I go with examples of assets, the more difficult those assets become to unwind, because shares are effectively liquid, and you
Yep.
can sell them down relatively quickly. But the more illiquid the asset, the harder it is to sell, or more importantly, the harder it is to sell for what you want to sell it for,
Mhm.
versus say a fire sale type arrangement. And then on top of that, you've then got things such as, winding down your corporate trustee and other things, if that's the path that you want to go. So there's so many steps um, to contemplate before you actually do that final, here's the last payout, whether that's to another super fund or to the members, as part of the process.
Yeah, so I guess taking that a step further as well, we have there are a number of things that ultimately people need to consider. So if someone's in the retirement phase and they're sort of beyond age 65, well, then there is a pathway that could allow for that wind up to occur in a much simpler way than
Yep.
maybe for someone that is, in their 30s or 40s and have decided that a self-managed super fund's not for them. So
Yep.
there are, I guess, layers of considerations here in that process that not only contemplate the investment strategy and the need to, in essence, dilute down, and in a lot of instances, you're not going to be able to in specie transfer assets across into the different product. But I guess what I'm trying to allude to here is we need to understand the dynamic that makes up the membership and the trusteeship to ensure that we can optimize the outcome for the client, but then allow us to actually set some expectations about how long that would actually play out as well.
Yeah, that's right. And I think, there's the broader thing. So there's the investment side of it, the strategy side of it too. And I've often found myself, when presenting in the area of winding up a self-managed super fund, is working the way through the checklist of reasons not to wind up a self-managed fund, because once you've done it, it's there's no going back.
Yep.
You have to go through fund establishment, all those sorts of processes again, and so it's really ensuring that that you've explored all avenues as to whether it is appropriate or not, whether potentially there's the ability to bring new members in, to change the investment strategy, change trustee structures, to change all sorts of things to keep it going. And equally in that, and one of the things that I always really despised when I saw it was when markets were not performing so well, and funds would, people go, I don't want to be in a self-managed super fund, and they'd wind it up and they'd basically throw away all of their tax losses or capital losses. It's like, well, you're not maximizing your super benefit by effectively throwing away those tools that might save you tax in the future. And so it's one of those things where you're not trying to convince people that self-managed super fund is right for them. It's the requirement to ensure that it's definitely not the right thing for them, and that it is the right time to get out of it, appreciating the consequences of winding up the fund.
Yeah, and then that probably you can extend that further to things like insurance. So we
Yep.
talk a lot about in the industry, if people are setting up funds that they don't in essence do a whole of balance transfer if they are going to lose that insurance, where they might not yet qualify again once they try and get a policy inside the fund. But that equally applies on the flip side, where the last thing that you want to be doing is trying to cash out all these benefits and then realizing that something like insurance, which could be crucial to the overall financial planning of that individual or individuals, is lost. And then again, you've got circumstances where ultimately they may then be uninsured moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's that's part of that concept of the checklist, where you're working through all of those key issues. What do you lose by making this decision to move elsewhere? And it's certainly far more than a cost analysis of how much does it cost to run my self-managed super fund versus how much is it, what's the admin fees to be in a retail or an industry fund. And I think that's the other piece of this is, if I move, so you've got your scenarios for post condition of release, where you've obviously got access to money, and if you want to take the money out of the super system, and age certainly plays a part in that. But for those that are pre-retirement, it's really also understanding where are you putting your money, and what does that what opportunities does that provide to you from an investment point of view. And we both appreciate that there's so many more investment options within industry and retail products these days for your standard investor. But what can you get in the self-managed super fund that you might not be able to if you're looking at the future of what your investment objectives are?
Yeah, so I think, and again, I think you raise a really good point there, where they're not in retirement phase, then you need to be really clear around the expectation and ability to migrate that money. For example, I've seen recently something issued by Hester, for example, where in essence there's a cutoff where there's money that's not going to be able to be transferred. I don't know the full background to that process, but ultimately it's going to stymie the ability to effectively wind up that fund if you're wanting to go into that relevant fund there as one particular example. So we have requirements that we must comply with from a super stream point of view. So therefore it becomes the documentation as well, because when we wind up the fund, that final audit will focus on the fact that have we actually complied with the requirements around the transfer of that benefit consistent with the payment standards that exist in essence, that T+3 days approach.
Yeah, and look, and I know you and I, we can't probably claim this in its entirety, but you and I had a fair bit to do with the dealings with the ATO with regards to when they were looking at the wind-up process because of SuperStream, and the fact that the ATO, once you lodge that final return, they would cancel the ABN within a few weeks or whatever, and often the money would come back, and then a decision to roll the money or the final payment to be made out couldn't be made because there was no valid ABN, and so that was leaving money in limbo. And so, we had a bit to play in getting the ATO to extend that time before they actually cancelled the ABN post that final return. So, you know, there's as we've both alluded to, it's not that that people shouldn't be winding up self-managed superannuation funds. It's just understanding all the elements associated with the process.
Yeah, and setting, I think it's really clear as professionals working with trustees is setting the expectations around what needs to happen.
Yep.
Spending the time working through and mapping out what those steps are and how you can potentially look at optimizing solutions and the like, and then going through that process. And the ATO have done a fantastic job in putting out guidance around that. There's some publications to support that. And we're going to be running a webinar on Thursday, the 29th, I believe it is, around winding up an SMSF and talking through some of the documents and the steps that how they interrelate to that approach, and incorporating our checklist that we've built to support our members when they go through these different steps when they wind up funds for their SMSF clients. So you can find out more, smartersmsf.com/events. Look up the Winding Up SMSF session. It is free to attend. So thank you to you, Tim, once again.
Always a pleasure.
Excellent. Have a great rest of the week, everyone. And we look forward to you joining us for the next edition of Feeling Smarter. Bye for now.
Bye all.